Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Franchising Sanitation Part 2. My name is Alexandra Knezovich. I'm the Program Manager for the Toilet Board Coalition. The Toilet Board Coalition was created to demonstrate business leadership for SDG 6. Our goal is to catalyze a robust business sector to deliver smart, sustainable, and resilient sanitation for all. We run the Toilet Accelerator program, which works with a series of entrepreneurs on an annual basis to design bespoke projects to drive the sanitation sector forward. You can learn more at our website at toiletboard.org. And we also have started the Fast Forward series, which is designed to activate the Business of Sanitation network and to provide more opportunities for businesses large and small to share expertise and make connections. Today, we are absolutely delighted to have Julie McBride and Bradley Heslop here to speak to each other for you, and then also to answer your questions that you might have about franchising sanitation. So without further ado, I will turn us over to Julie, who will give, Julie, maybe you can give just a really quick introduction of yourself, and then absolutely, start in and tell us about franchising sanitation.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So I've spent the last 25 years working in the field of global health and applying the franchise model to expand access to healthcare. And I've over the course of my career have become convinced that the franchise model provides some powerful tools to really accelerate the pace of international development across a whole range of sectors. So I'm really happy to be here and with you today, sharing some of why I think that's the case and how it can be done quickly. And then I'm really excited to talk with Bradley a little bit more about a specific example of how the model has been used in the sanitation sector. So do you have the slides? So I'll just quickly, again, just take a few minutes to kind of go through the why of franchising and the how of franchising, just a general high-level overview, and then turn it over to Bradley so we can get some more interesting case examples of how the model can actually work. But first of all, Bill, I think everybody knows, Bill Clinton's famous quote of that nearly every problem has been solved by someone somewhere, and that the challenge of the 21st century is to just find out what works and scale it up. And I would just add to that not only do we need to scale things up, but we need to do so faster and more sustainably. And where there are efforts today to scale proven social innovations, they're mostly being executed at a rate that's far too slow to make a meaningful dent in the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's kind of represented on this slide by that blue line. Things are being expanded, but not at a rate that's capable of actually solving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And in order to solve those goals, we'll need to accelerate our pace of solution deployment to more of an exponential growth rate that matches the rate of the growth of the problems that we're trying to solve. And that's sort of represented by this green line here on the slide. And that's where franchising comes in. So you can go to the next slide. So if you look at this slide, you can see that exponential growth trajectory. And what this is meant to show is that, franchising as an expansion model is capable of geometric scale, and is really the only business growth model that's capable of that sort of growth, while at the same time maintaining standards and actually achieving economies of scale, where the larger the network gets, the lower the cost per operations per location. So this graph actually shows an example of one business, the Subway sandwich franchise, that started as one location, and over the course of just 30 years grew to 40,000 locations around the world. And really no other model is capable of that kind of growth. And that growth trajectory is what is so appealing to me and many others about this franchising model. And you can go to the next slide. And that's really why so many businesses in the commercial sector have actually chosen the franchise model as their expansion model. And it's used by, more than it's estimated that there are more than 4,000 franchise brands out there across an estimated 200 different industries. So the model is very adaptable to a whole host of industries. It's not just the restaurant business. And it's also being used increasingly by countries all around the world, including emerging market countries. So you can go to the next slide. So again, most people associate franchising with the commercial or with well-known commercial brands. It is gaining some traction. The model's gaining some traction with social businesses, and this slide, including the sanitation sector, and this slide shows some examples of social businesses that actually are currently using the franchise model to expand. So yeah, so the idea here behind the franchise model is that you find a business with proven results that's both profitable and impactful, and then it's systematized for replication and then transferred through a license agreement to local people who then own and operate that business in their community. And in this way, the original business owner can actually grow more rapidly by using other people's both human and financial capital and knowledge of local markets. So you can go to the next slide. And then that gets into, okay, you've convinced me, but how do you do this thing? It just seems so complicated. And so you can go to the next slide. And this will be the last slide I talk through, and then I'll turn it over to Bradley. But I've put together this 6-stage framework that tries to break it down into smaller, more manageable stages of development, because it is a complex model, but it's not rocket science, especially if you break it down into smaller chunks of time and get the help you need to progress through these stages. And what this diagram shows is these 6 stages of development. Stage 1 being that stage where you're actually proving that the concept is both impactful and profitable at the unit level. And then once you've done that, you can progress to stage 2, which is where you're demonstrating that the concept is replicable in a few different locations. So it's not just something unique to that particular marketplace where you establish the first business, but it will work in a couple of different locations. Mm-hmm. And you have an opportunity to sort of refine some of your operating systems. Once you've done that and you've demonstrated that your business is actually replicable and that franchising is the right method to use to further scale your business, you would enter stage 3, which is where you're actually designing the franchise system. And that's essentially creating a second business. That's the business of replicating your business. And that's where, on this diagram, you see these yellow dots, and those dots represent the various different types of inputs that are required at each stage. And so what this shows is that at stage 3, it requires a pretty significant investment of time and money to really develop a good quality, solid franchise system, a second business. But down the road, that investment really pays off, because if you develop it well, you're able to grow much more rapidly and effectively. So once you've developed that system, you enter stage 4, which is where you actually start executing that system locally. So you start franchising your business. And that's an opportunity. You want to start small locally so that you can really kind of, test out your system, your new business, and work out any kinks in the system before you take it nationally, which is stage 5. And that's where the stage where you grow to a point where you have the critical mass of franchisees needed for your franchisor business to actually get to a point where it's profitable. And then once you've done that, you're ready to move on to stage 6, where you can expand to new markets in new countries. And that's, ideally what we want to do with social businesses is scale globally in the same way that the commercial sector has scaled McDonald's or Subway to multiple countries around the world. And that's when we can have really tremendous impact. So those are, that's sort of a general framework for how a business can progress from a to a point where they're actually able to scale and have meaningful impact. Now, Roots is an example of a sanitation business that actually has successfully expanded through a franchise model. And Roots' co-founder, Bradley Heslop, we're lucky to have him here with us today to share his experience in this area and hopes for where they can take this business in the future. Hi, Bradley.
Hi, Julie. How are you? And hello, everyone watching wherever you're watching from. It's good to be here. So I'll start a bit about how I got onto this nexus of sanitation and franchising, a bit about myself. So I'm an entrepreneur from the UK. I went to the University of Southampton, and while I was there, I was involved in an entrepreneurial society called Enactus, or it was called SIFE back in the day for those who are familiar with it. And that was all about using students to run projects in their communities, locally or internationally, that use business strategies to change lives. And it was while being involved in that society, we had a strong international side. And we came up with the idea of somehow helping the people who had contacted us from Kisii, Kenya, and was asking, how do we deal with some of the issues in our community? So we assessed what was happening, and working with the partner through conversations, they mentioned sanitation as a big issue. And also the most vulnerable group there was widowed women and single mothers, mainly because of the HIV outbreak that happened not too long ago. So we tried to merge the two things together and tackle sanitation through providing entrepreneurial opportunities for these single mothers. And the idea we came up with was converting human waste into fertilizer. And we had to do a whole bunch of engineering stuff to design the toilets and work with our university and external corporate partners in order to make that happen.
Cool, thanks. And talk a little bit about your long-term expansion goals and where you are now relative to meeting those goals, and try to map against those 6 stages a little bit so we can understand how you've grown.
Yeah, so if I can have my slides up, I can go through the Roots model and go into some more detail.
Cool.
So the Roots business model is a micro business concept that's designed for rural areas, rural sanitation. And we use ecological sanitation type toilets, where we divert the urine away from the feces, collect them separately, take them off site to convert them into liquid and solid fertilizers, which the entrepreneurs then sell to the local communities where they live and where they work. And it's that process of using the circular economy and closing the nutrient cycle as well, from bum to toilet to fertilizer to crops to food on the plate again. And that is the basis of the Roots model. And by doing that, we're able to divert money already in the community away from sanitation, towards sanitation. So the entrepreneurs work with local laborers to build these toilets, and they're multi-cubicle toilets built mainly in schools because it has a secondary impact on education, but also increasingly now in places like churches and markets as well. And the main part of the model is around improving hygiene behaviors as well. And for the entrepreneurs, that is a marketing strategy for them. So if you see in this business model diagram here, they build the toilets, convert the waste. But then instead of just simply selling it to the community, they first provide hygiene and sanitation education. And they do that to, one, improve people's knowledge of why this business exists, but also to create an association between hygiene, cleanliness, and the entrepreneurs themselves. And then the entrepreneurs, then by association, have that cleanliness and trust put onto the products that they're selling, which come from a source people have been brought up told they should stay away from. So then that creates trust in the community and trust of the product, because the demand is already there. Crop yields are decreasing. People are using artificial fertilizers and mentioning many problems that it's causing in the soil and the general fakeness of some of them on the market, and the fact that some of them are tampered with. So the only barrier is the behavior change and the acceptance of the community. So from selling the fertilizer to the local community, the entrepreneur is able to sustain themselves and their family's livelihood, and also to take that next step in order to use the profit that they have to contribute towards building more toilets. And it can be done organically, but in the initial stages, it's helped along the way in order to speed up the building of more toilets. Then the business, once it reaches about 6 toilets, will start growing organically and building 1, maybe 2 toilets a year in the community where they are, or in neighboring communities, to set up almost a satellite franchise of that model. So if I have the slides back. So this all works because of what we call our micro enterprise model. It's the fact that the business operates local to the community. And often you find with a lot of development initiatives, people always wonder why trade isn't the answer, because people can't afford the products, and then why charity is the only thing that can actually help, especially rural communities where there's not the population density or the incomes to actually create commercial incentives. So the micro enterprise model means that the entrepreneurs live and work in the community that the business operates in. That means the wage that they earn is reflective of the wage needed to survive in that community. For example, you're not funding someone to live in a city where they'll need a higher income, where they'll have more costs. You're funding someone to live locally. It also means logistics becomes much easier. So what we've done in the Roots model is we've almost eliminated the logistical cost, and it is actually now just a cost of time, because we use free methods, carts, wagons, wheelbarrows, whatever it may be, depending on the distance. So it means there's no cost of fuel, no cost of transport associated with transporting the fertilizer or transporting the collected human waste. And what we've done is we've converted this into, we systematized it, documented everything, worked with partners and advisors in order to produce a business in a box, is what we call it, where we've packaged everything so anyone can just follow the procedure and set up a Roots business. And we put that into a nice, neat business in a box, which we can sell to other organizations. So Roots is one of our 3 franchises that WSV have, and they all operate on, next slide please. They all operate on our WSV social franchise model, where we provide a business in a box similar to the one on the last slide to the NGOs, charities working locally or working internationally. And they then, using their existing connections with communities, with local government, with local community leaders, they find entrepreneurs, train them to run these businesses, and provide them with the capital needed to start the business in the form of the things they need to run the business. So they will pay for the toilets to be constructed, and the schools or churches where they're built also contribute around 30 to 50% of the price. They will provide all of the storage and all of the administration materials that the business needs. So everything except for cash generally. Then the entrepreneurs run the business and impact the community's economy, education, and the health. The business then repays the loan from their revenues, And then once they finish repaying the loan, they pay a continual franchise fee back to the NGO, who in our case is what we would call a master franchisee. They're someone who has a license to set up franchise units in places, and they're given that rights from us. They're given the branding and the ongoing support from us. We also do network level fundraising in order to help fund some of these startup capital loans and some of the monitoring and evaluating associated with these enterprises. So that's really how the Roots model works.
Then, Julie, maybe I'll go back to the 6 stages, and maybe Bradley, you could answer just kind of where you're at, or where Roots or WSB is at, you know, on that path, just so we can tie together sort of these two different models.
Yeah. So the Roots business model is, because of the way we operate, our main business is selling franchises to master franchisees, to NGOs who act in that capacity. So we're a hybrid of stage 4 to 6, but for all real purposes, we're stage 4. So that's the stage of development we're at. We started franchising where it's not yet a sustainable franchise, but we are scaling through master franchising, both locally to where we have operated before and internationally, in order to work with particular NGOs that we want to build relationships with. But
fabulous.
Is where number 4.
So at what point do you project you'll be at stage 5? You'll actually, in your financial modeling, have you determined how many master franchisees and franchisees you need to be able to fully recover your operating costs at the WSB/franchisor level?
Yeah, so we need roughly 20 master franchisees, which we will have at some point in 2019. So about just under 2 years left on that. And then we'll be at stage 5, or probably at stage 6 by that point, because it is a global franchise at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we do that is we don't recover any costs from the community level. So one of the conversations that me and Julie had with people in the sector and funders, the concern they had was to scale your impact or to scale your business model and reach more people, you have to sacrifice your social impact, because you need to recover more costs in order to scale organically at a higher percentage compared to relying on external capital. And our model was designed to avoid that. So we don't recover any costs from the community level in order to sustain our own activities. The NGOs that we work with, the master franchisees, provide all of our funding that we need, and that's been modeled as that way. But the communities, the money that they repay in the loan, and then the franchise fee that they pay ongoing, is designed to make sure the products and services provided are still affordable to the community, that the fertilizer can still be competitive. So that's why we don't recover costs from that level, because otherwise we'd price people out. And that money is used to grow the pot of money that already exists in order to fund and scale the business faster. So by not taking money from that level, we're able to use that money to set up more franchises, or to give a loan to an existing one so they can grow the number of toilets that they have in the community.
Can you talk a little bit, Bradley, about the experience you've had so far with master franchising? Like, how are you finding master franchisees, and what are sort of the reasons that they're giving you for wanting to become a master franchisee, and how is that working out?
Yeah, so because of the nature of our master franchisees, they're quite easy to find generally. They're NGOs, charitable organizations. So that means they're already trying to publicize themselves quite widely. And there tends to be quite good networks and registers of them, particularly in the UK, where we can just put in the criteria of the NGOs we want, and we can get a list back of all of the people that we can talk to. It's not the same way in a lot of other places. So it's a lot of Googling, going to events, referrals. That's how we find them. We then match them up against our criteria for a master franchisee, which is a general alignment to the type of work that we're doing, that they be currently doing similar things, or have the capacity or the base skills to do so. So they might be running a similar type of program in terms of skill set, if not in the same thematic area. certain number of full-time staff, income, ability to access financing themselves, and a certain level of trustworthiness and reliability. Those are all come under our criteria for a master franchisee. In terms of how we found working with them, it's always a mixed bag. So the one thing we found is they're all 100% on board with this type of model, because the word on the street now is sustainability, and this model is sustainable. It's not only sustainable, it creates a sexy thing to invest in for funders, and to the point where, since NGOs that we've been working with have applied only for microfinance loans, they've had 100% success rate on their application.
Okay, so I'm sold. If I'm an NGO, I'm sold. So for people who are, I think we're running out of time. So let me just ask you one last question, and that would be, for NGOs that are out there thinking about, investing in developing their own sanitation business, maybe you've planted a new seed in their minds that they don't have to invest in creating something new, but maybe there's a way for them to actually play more of a role of actually implementing or executing something that already exists. And how could they go about exploring the possibility of working with you on something like this?
Yeah, so you can find us at wsv.global. That's our URL. It's also pretty much our social media handle on everything other than Twitter, which is _global, WSV_global. Which you can see.
Would you take them through?
So that will take you to our main WSV website, and you can contact us through there. Our email addresses are on there. So if anyone has any franchising questions, who part of the TVC group, you can also contact me on there. And what really is just, if you want to implement programs like this or something completely different, but you want to find someone who's already designed, built, and tested a model, instead of you doing it all yourself, maybe you don't have the right skills or the right support around you, but someone else who has proven it. Talk to Julie, who she knows everybody in the sector that is doing social franchising, and she could point you towards the solution that you need.
Okay. I think we're out of time.
Yeah. No, that's fabulous. It's great. There's just some other questions. I just wanted to get to at least one that had been sent in, and I'm not sure, maybe Julie, this is more for you. I'll let you guys determine who wants to answer it. But we had someone asking, or an entrepreneur asking, how to deal with the ownership and maintenance of the hardware in the system. Does that ownership stay with the license giver? Or is that transferring completely to the franchisee in that sense?
I think it can be either or. It depends on the financing of the business. In some cases, there'll be like a lease to own type of arrangement. Maybe Bradley can speak to the specifics of the routes.
I think, and also maybe this informs it too. I know a lot of, the entrepreneurs that we're working with, they are operating their own businesses. So they're not coming from an NGO model. So they have proprietary toilets or proprietary technology, hardware to transform the waste, or different things like that, then that is really what they offer. Yeah. And so is there, what are some of the questions maybe they should ask themselves to help determine which side of that they go to, in terms of whether they're retaining the ownership of those products, or whether that's part of the franchise model?
Yeah, I mean, they own the intellectual property, and their licensing relates to somebody else to actually operate using that system. In return for certain conditions, agreeing to compliance standards and maintain confidentiality of the intellectual property.
Right.
So I've got a good example of this actually. In the UK, I'm not sure how long ago it was, but McDonald's the big franchise ran into a few troubles and they managed to hold on for so long because of the way they kept hold of certain bits of information. So they ran into an issue where they had master franchisees on a regional level almost. So they had quite a few restaurants, and they got to the point where they were wondering, why do we need McDonald's? We could do it on our own, and started to get a certain level of autonomy in what they were doing, arguing back to certain hard rules and ignoring some soft rules. And so the only reason they didn't go off and do it on their own is because with a franchise, you have to add enough value to your franchisees, because especially in development context or in developing countries, people can often just go off and do it on their own. So when it comes to the ownership of certain IPs, the more you can keep in-house and sell, distribute, or pass on to your franchisees, the better in many cases, because then they can't do it without you. They need the product or the equipment or the design. You are the only one who knows how to do it. So it would depend on what the aim of your model is as well, how much control you give to the franchisee, to the master franchisee, or to retain yourself.
Fabulous. Excellent. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation myself. I'm ready to get started on my own franchise. So thank you very much. As both Bradley and Julie mentioned, I'm more than happy to take any follow-up questions. Feel free to always send us an email at fastforward@toiletboard.org. Or as you saw, Bradley's contact details were up there, and I'm sure Julie's were on her slide as well. We can always put you in contact with them. So thank you for joining, and looking forward to more incredible interviews in 2018. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.